What happened to the people who were asleep on the Titanic? That's what we're talking about today. Welcome back. We're not talking about the Titanic. We're talking about Jesus in a boat on the Sea of Galilee and a storm comes up. And so it's from Mark chapter 4. If you've been following along, we're doing 50 stories from the New Testament that we believe everybody should know. And so this one, Mark chapter 4, finds us with the disciples in a boat on the Sea of Galilee, and a storm comes up. So Hope, you've got the story for us today.
So Jesus had been teaching, and he looks at his disciples that are with him, and he's like, let's go across the lake. And so they get in a boat, and they start making their way across the lake. And evening comes, and so it gets dark, and this big storm starts up over the lake. And so the disciples are really afraid, and Jesus actually had fallen asleep in the stern of the boat. He's like on a cushion asleep, and seemingly oblivious to what's going on, though we know he wouldn't have been. And they wake him up, and they're like, don't you know there's a storm? And Jesus, there's a storm, we're afraid. And so Jesus stands up, and he just tells the storm, he says, quiet, be still, silence, be still. And the storm stops. And at that point, the disciples look at each other, and they're kind of in shock and fear even. And they're like, who is this guy? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, I love their question. Like, what kind of man is this?
Yeah.
Like, and you think about everything they had seen already,
Right.
up at that point. I mean, he's
Yeah.
healing these people. He's already like cast out demons, but this is like, what? Who is this guy? So, well, I've been on the Sea of Galilee. I've been on the Sea of Galilee at night. Thank God it didn't storm, because that would have been weird. But the interesting thing about the Sea of Galilee, it sits first is really low. It's like 700 feet below sea level. And then on the eastern side, there are these like the land rises really quickly, like 2,000 feet or something, just super quick. And so there's a lot of temperature variation that happens around there, and the storms really do just spring up out of nowhere. In fact, I saw a video not too long ago, and the Sea of Galilee is really shallow too. It's not that deep, but there were like 10-foot waves in this storm that just like sprang up. So we think oftentimes, well, aren't these fishermen? Shouldn't they know? Like they've been there, like they grew up there, right? They grew up there. They know how bad the storms can get. Plus, the thing about like the ancient world is that the sea, like, so this is a story of the sea, but it's also the sea. Because like, according to the book of Daniel, the sea is where monsters come from. So this is also a little bit of a story about like the dark powers of evil that threaten God's people, that try to thwart God's purposes. And so kind of even thinking in that, like, what is it about Jesus that like in the face of this evil, like he's just asleep? Like, what do you take from that?
I mean, just the fact that I guess we don't know, right? I said I know he's not oblivious, or we knew he wasn't oblivious. I don't know. I don't know how that worked, for Jesus and his mind and what he was, But if he's God, then he's also aware of this, this sea stirring up. And he grew up there too. So he's been there. He knows that this happens, and he's just at so much peace. And I don't even know that he's trying to like did he like set out on this trip across the water knowing this was going to happen? Was this the plan?
Right.
Or was it like that doesn't even matter because he would have peace in the middle of the storm regardless? You know, we don't know any of that. But he was sleeping while the boat was probably rocking, and the wind was blowing and there was noise, and so he still was asleep, you know. It's just this mystery of the peace he had, the faith and all of that.
That's just, and then he comes out of it and he looks at him, he's like, don't you believe yet?
Right.
Like, where's your faith at, guys?
Right.
You know? And it, you know, it reminds me too that like storms are going to come. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, like our story even can kind of like mirror or be laid on top of this story because you know, in our lives storms are going to come up, like storms are going to rage, and it's kind of like, okay, cool, like wake Jesus up, pray, you know, bring him your fear, bring him your frustration. Don't be surprised if he, you know, pops up and just calms the storm in front of you, but then also don't be surprised if he looks at you and is like, hey, when we're going to grow some of that faith, you know, like where's your faith at? Like, so it just kind of it takes me there.
You know what's really interesting too is that this situation, you know, as we were talking about it, I'm trying to recall another situation where the environment and the circumstances would have potentially harmed Jesus. Right? So this is showing a circumstance where even though Jesus is present, Jesus is there in the middle of it, there still is a storm that comes up.
Yeah.
You know, and so a lot of times in the scripture, he's teaching them about, you know, there's this parable of this thing that happened or could happen in your life, or maybe you know someone that this happened to. But in this situation, like they're in very real earthly danger, you know, and Jesus is there too. And so even as a believer, Jesus is with me, and yet there's still storms, you know.
Yeah, I mean, how many of us have bought into the myth or the lie that's like, well, if Jesus is in your boat, you won't have any storm. You won't have any problems. And it's like, no, this is the story where they didn't forget Jesus on the other side.
Right.
Like, and this is the story where Jesus this isn't the story where Jesus is like, go on without me, I'm going to hang out here for a little while.
Right.
And so he sent them to no, Jesus is in the boat.
Right.
And the storm arises.
And they weren't being disobedient. They were ministering, and then there was a storm. So this is not a storm that came because someone was doing something wrong. You know, it's just a storm in life.
And so storms are going to come.
Yeah.
Wake Jesus up, pray, and just trust that he's going to take care of it. So awesome, everybody. Hey, thank you for joining us today on this another installment of our 50 stories in the New Testament that everybody should know. We hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us. Click like, share, subscribe, all those things, and check in next time with us as we continue this journey. So thanks. Have a great day.